Hello, good afternoon. This is Michael from Vienna. I've been using Windy over the last several years and also worked with the community, engaged with the community and some of the people who work for Windy. So I've accumulated a little bit of experience, and essentially I'll summarize here with what that experience is and how it can be used for ballooning. Anyway, a short overview on what we'll cover. Just a little bit on background and philosophy of the windy weather application, which is a little bit different than your average weather service. We need to talk a little bit about forecast models. That is required, and it's not very common being treated in at least introductory material. Windy offers several weather models, sometimes 6 or 7, depending on the world region, and you need a little bit background on those to make effective use of them. I'm concentrating on the models which are available in Europe or in my region. There are other models, regional models, for the instance for the continental US, and for Asia's, India, and the like. Those I have no clue about. I won't cover those. After that, a little bit theoretical intro. We'll have a more in-depth look on the screen organization of the Windy application. I'm specifically focusing on the web version of this application. The mobile applications are great, but only for a last-minute check. The reason for that is there's such a lot of information in the Windy application that the average mobile screen is just not good enough in drilling down to the relevant information. The second reason is that the web version has several functions which the mobile functions do not have. In particular, for ballooning relevant is the trajectory planner plugin. Plugins do not work for security reasons on the mobiles. I have no idea if this is going to change. We've asked for fixing that, but I don't understand it's not in the pipe as of now. So we'll focus on the web browser version. You want to have a decent screen and, for instance, use Chrome or something like that, an up-to-date web browser. We'll look at the organization of the screen a little bit in more detail. We'll do standard tasks like doing a wind forecast check thermals, clouds, precipitation, things like that. Then we'll do an example using the trajectory function and look at the route planner cross sections. That is a very helpful function. I'm doing that for basically all events I attended. It's usually very welcome. We'll have a look at the radio sound view. The radio sound feature is something which was added during COVID by Chris Retiev and me. Oh, hi, Chris. He just tuned in, I think. He's in the chat now, I see him. We were getting a little bit bored with all those lockdowns, so we started doing that. Chris did the front end, I did the back end, and it turned out to be quite popular. We handed it over to Windy, and it's now part of the standard function in a standard function set in Windy since about maybe half a year or a year. That is quite helpful for ballooning as a reality check because it gives you a view into the third dimension. And it's not a forecast, it's actually measured. So that's why it's very valuable. We'll have a look at the radar layer and explore a little trick there. Namely, we'll check, is this thunderstorm going to hit us or not? That can be quite relevant information in an event if you cancel a flight or go for it or wait for how the conditions develop. So that's a useful trick in the bag. And if there's some time left, we'll cover early warning for a long distance flight. That is mostly relevant for long distance flights over in my case for Alps crossings. If you're interested in that in that, if you will, feature set or the relevant information, I have a link to another talk which I gave on how you plan and execute an Alps crossing, and that covers some of those aspects. Anyway, oh, sorry, I didn't switch. I talked to the cover slide all the time. Anyway, so that's the material which we'll cover. Now, Windy is quite different from your standard weather app as you find it on your phone or your tablet, and also quite somewhat different from what you have from a meteor briefing or some other professional weather service. Your average app usually works like so. It doesn't tell you where the data comes from. It throws in some secret source of a vendor value, whatever that happens to be. They turn the crank and suddenly they declare victory and say, this is the weather for you. It doesn't give you any information on how it came to the conclusion, where the information was coming from, whether what the reliability of this estimates is going to be, and the like. So this is the low end of the weather apps, if you will. If you dig into these apps, it turns out most of them use a single model. That's the GFS, by NOAA, the Global Forecasting System. And the reason for that, not that it's so great, it's free. That's why it's being used by most of these applications. Some of the models are pay for usage or more difficult to obtain. And comparing is a little bit more complex. So the simple apps skip that. Now, in comparison, let's have a look on what Windy does. If you have used Google Maps, you've discovered the feature choosing a layer, like the satellite layer, the standard map layer, the terrain layer, and so forth. That is a typical function of, if you will, a geographical information system, organizing the data into layers, and you select the layer which you're looking at. So that's a data aspect, if you will. The layer is one choice. Then we have location and we have time. And since we're preparing for flight, altitude also plays into the game. What that gives us is one particular aspect of the weather as determined by the input layer which we chose, like for instance, wind, precipitation, radar view, and the like. Other than professional weather models, weather forecasting services, there's no such thing as a synoptic forecast or a drawing like approaching fronts or the like. Windy is basically a data viewer. There are no meteorologists which interpret the data for you and create a synopsis. So that's all you get. It's a data viewer, and you won't get a synoptic outlook from it. Now, if we look a little bit more closely on what type of layers there are available, by the way, there's a ton. There are like at least 30, maybe 50 different layers there, but they roughly fall into the following categories. First, current observational data, current meteorological data like wind observations, average wind gusts, temperature, clouds, radar coverage, very important, satellite films and the like. So that's basically the set of station reports, like wind reports from wind precipitation reports from weather stations. So that's the basic meteorological measurement data that's typically integrated in one layer per measurement type, like temperature or precipitation, as different layers. So, sorry, there's a second set, which is very useful and which I really suggest you explore. I call that category data integration. It has a impressive collection of webcams, and we'll do an example and when we go for example usage. Now you do that. Looking through webcams with a current view is actually quite interesting, especially for determining landing conditions. If you're going over a mountain and you're not sure is there fog behind there or rain or whatever. So webcams is a super useful view. The weather stations view, if you choose that, you can drill down onto a per station weather history. So if you want to see the history of one particular location a little bit more detail, the station view is helpful. The third in this category is the collection of airports. There's a layer called airports, a little plane symbol, and that includes the basic data on the airport, like runway orientation, length, and the like, but also the METAR and TAFs, and I think also the current node times. And if you choose that layer on the map, if you see a little green ring, then that indicates that's an airport with where VFR or visual flight rule conditions are being forecasted, which is currently VFR, that is. So that's the data integration layer. Now, for looking into the future, we have a choice of several forecast models. I'll cover the question of forecast models on the next two slides. But it has a very rich set of models, and it can be quite confusing the first-time user. The question of which model do I choose? What does that tell me? What's the likelihood of these models being correct, and so forth? So that's a little bit the trouble of choosing the proper one. Windy has pioneered a capability which, as far as I can tell, no other weather application has. Namely, it's extensible. Extensible means that you can write a piece of software to add a view to this already existing views. And doing that, you can access the data sources which are provided within Windy. That is also the method which Chris used in creating the trajectory plugin. You'll find that this feature has caused a lot of creativity. There may be, we'll go through that, and when we see the trajectory plugin, there are about, I think, my gut feeling is 15 plugins which are linked to in the online version. There are many more, and you can explicitly load your own created ones if you want to. But these 10 or 15 are the more successful ones, if you will. And those cover all sorts of fields like paragliding, sailing, Um, but even COVID incidence distributions, all sorts of data was added through these user extensions, and we'll go through an example later on. So in principle, the Windy application is a viewer device for viewing data layers, always one at a time. And you look at the layer by location. In the case of forecast models, or looking at station data by time, and sometimes also by altitude. Okay, and what you get is the aspect view of that particular layer. You don't get a synopsis. For that, you need to pay a real meteorologist, which, as far as I can tell, is not employed by windy.com in Prague. Anyway, so that's the difference to other weather applications. Now let's go forward to the to discussing forecast models, because that's it took me quite a while to get the hang of it. So what's a forecast model anyway? A forecast model, it tries to predict the weather conditions, starting from measurements and applying computational methods going forward. Yeah, and these weather models have there are many of those. Yeah, I'm just listing the one here which are applicable in the greater European theater, if you will. They differ in coverage. Some are global, some are regional. Sometimes they've actually quite small coverage, like better part of the central EU in the case of ICON D2. They differ very much in resolution. We'll come to that. How does the computing of the weather forecasts looking at the future happen? Well, it's not a continuum over the whole Earth's surface. Rather, the Earth is divided into a grid, and forecasts are computed for each grid point, but not for the points between them. So one of the key parameters of a model is the grid resolution, the point distance. You can imagine if you increase the accuracy by reducing the point distance, if you double the resolution by halving the point distance, it takes 4 times as much computational effort as the previous step. You see that increasing the accuracy by reducing the grid point distance is a very expensive decision to make in terms of computational effort, which is really the limiting factor in these forecasts. So that's one of the trade-offs. What you do not get is very long forecast models, like a week or 2 weeks, with a very high resolution on the grid level, because that's simply not yet possible given today's technology. This will change, but not in my lifetime. So what you have is short-term high-resolution models, and you have longer-term models which are more coarse. Yeah, in the sometimes there are even whole families of models. The typical example being the ICON family of models by the Deutsche Wetterdienst. Of these, there are at least now 3 of them being imported into Windy. There's a standard global one called the ICON model, which has 13 kilometers grid resolution, global coverage, as I said, and about a week look ahead. Okay, now and out of these, sometimes weather forecasting shops create what they call nests. Like they take a cutout in a smaller geographic area and do that in a higher resolution. You'll see that IconEU has double about twice the resolution of the global icon, about the same look ahead, but it's it's much smaller footprint. It's only the EU. And drilling down further, there's an even higher resolution nested model. It's called Icon D2. That's also available within Windy. And it has about 2 kilometers grid resolution, but even there again, even the coverage is smaller, and also the look ahead because of the computational effort. So it's only 2 days look ahead, but it's high resolution and only covers Central Europe. On the front of high resolution models, we have another interesting contender. That's the Arome model by Météo France, which has even higher resolution than Icon D2. I keep it around as a, if you will, a second opinion. It's not available in all of Austria. It starts westerly of roughly Salzburg, and basically covers Western Europe. It's very useful to have and check for a ground wind, for instance, for a second opinion. Unfortunately, the data Arome delivers is not suitable to creating trajectories, which is why it's not in a trajectory plugin. Not every model provides every data aspect, and in particular, not every data aspect which is needed for trajectory forecasts. So these were the models, global, the model resolution, coverage, and look ahead, the 3 parameters. On the other end of the spectrum, for global coverage and a longer look ahead, we have the free American model by NOAA, they're called the Global Forecasting System, with about 2 weeks look ahead. And even longer than that, the ECMWF from Reading in the UK, which has a substantially better grid resolution. It's 22 versus 9 kilometers and almost 3 weeks look ahead. So if we just look at the grid, if we take, for instance, GFS and Arome, you'll see that the grid resolution varies by about a factor of 15. Yeah? So that's quite a lot, a factor of 1,500 to 1,500%, if you will. And that gives you an idea on how coarse or fine the spatial resolution of these models is. As a general rule, if you're looking for a short-term forecast, for instance, like looking on for takeoff conditions for next morning, let's assume that scenario, you would typically look at short-term high-resolution models. So you take Icon D2 or Arome, if you can get it for your area. If not, fall back to the next best thing. For instance, in Todi last week, that is outside the coverage of Icon D2, but it's within coverage of IconEU. And the trajectories which I posted there were all based on the IconEU model. However, if you're looking further ahead, the ECMWF and GFS are really, and Icon, the global Icon, are your only options. I'm just noting one thing, the ECMWF, that's stands for European Computer Model for Medium Range Weather Forecast. The M stands for medium range. That's something different from what our cherished Austrocontrol air traffic service company believes, that they give you the next day's wind forecast based on ECMWF, although that doesn't make any sense, but such are bureaucracies. So ECMWF really kicks in about 3 to 4 days to a week out. Yeah, my experience is that especially short term, it tends to overestimate especially ground winds, usually by a factor of 2 or close to 2. So in terms of ground wind, always go for the short-term high-resolution models. Yeah? Another aspect which I didn't touch upon, what's the theory behind it, and can the weather model actually consider orographic detail? Well, depending on the resolution, you can imagine if you have a valley which is 5 kilometers wide, GFS has absolutely no clue about the weather. In the valley, it might be able to say something about, say, the temperature based on the barostatic equation, but certainly not as a solid forecast. So most models are based on the hydrostatic model method, and some of them, especially high-resolution models, actually consider convective activity. I have one example later. I'm not sure if we have the time to cover that. Excuse me, where you see the advantage of using a model based on convective activity. That helps particularly when you're trying to forecast flights within the terrain. Outside of terrain, models are pretty much more similar, but within the terrain that is below the skyline, that's what separates the men from the boys, if you will. Anyway, so we discussed resolution. I am just showing a short animation on, so you get a grasp on what models actually see of the orography of a landscape. And as an underlying map, I used Western Austria, Tyrol and Vorarlberg and parts of Salzburg. Now, if you look at this, this goes through the several weather models, and the grid is the grid resolution of that particular model. And you see what a difference it makes in what detail of the orography that the model actually can see. Yeah? So you see the high resolution models actually see if you're in the valley. I'm not sure if that is the proper term, but then I'm claiming MBA rights. I'm not a meteorologist. But that gives a rough idea on what the resolution of these models is, yeah, and why using a high resolution model is a good idea if you can get it. The next slide is a very subjective one. That's why I have this big fat warning box here. It's gut feeling, guided by some tutoring, but it's not scientific in any shape or form, okay? And also I use windy supported models only, meaning there might be better suited models if they're not in windy. I don't know about them. I don't have the patience drilling down into that, and so that's my personal choice. But you'll see in the use case, if you're in the less than 2 days ahead, usually take the icon D2 if I can get it, falling back to icon EU, and outside that to icon. If there's something else available, that's up to local conditions. I understand the North American model works just as fine, but I think it's called NAMCONUS, North American Continental US. I don't know anything about that. So for short-term forecasts, 2 days and less, go for the icon models or Rome if you can get it. 2 to 5 days, you might look into ECMWF and icon EU as a comparison. And if you're out more than a week or so, that is really shaky territory in forecasting ballooning out in a week or so. So your only options are really ECMWF and global forecasting system. The Windy has one layer called NEMS, which is data which comes from Meteo Blue. Unfortunately, that data is not suited for doing trajectories, because I think that this data stops at like 15 or 1800 meters upwards. So that's my choice of models, and now gets closer to actually using this thing. There's a little bit much theory, but well, we're doing okay in 28 minutes. Anyway, what I'll cover now is I'll walk you through the Windy website that has a lot of things on it, which means it can be quite frightening to the uninitiated. If you can do it, use a web browser on a PC or a laptop or a Macintosh or whatever. Use a Chrome browser, and we'll go through these examples now in turn. Yeah. So one thing which I recommend to you is you can create an account with Windy. You will not be spammed with advertisements and the like. And this is very helpful, because one thing Windy does is synchronizing your choices across usages of that account. So you use it on one browser, you set your preferences there, and then you go to another browser or another PC or laptop or whatever. Your preferences are carried with you. That's not unimportant, because there's a ton of things to choose from. Yeah, we'll come to that in the next slide. But yeah, create an account, and if you're doing something more than a last-minute check, try to use a proper PC or laptop, or and not just a mobile version, which is really good just for last-minute checks. Okay. So what you can do, we'll walk through the major elements in the user interface, on how we choose preferred layers, also to reduce screen clutter, because layers like sulfur oxide and sea swell are not particularly relevant to us, so we'll cut those out, and that leaves some more real estate on the screen. You can set something like favorite locations, or your standard takeoff location, if you will. We'll explore weather models and layers. We'll work with the time axis and the location picker. You remember when the organization, I talked to organization, data layers by location, by time gives you an aspect. So work with the time axis and the location picker is important. And we'll work one example of a plugin, which is the trajectory plugin. Okay, now I'm assuming now we have an account, and we'll go through the interesting layers. I'll probably switch to a live web browser. Please be patient with me as I'm trying that. So perhaps I'll need to have the Windy cap on. Anyway, let's see, where can I find my browser? Oh, here it is. Okay, yep. Okay, in theory, you should see the browser now. Did that work?
Ja, funktioniert.
Alles wunderbar. Hallelujah. Okay. This is actually the browser view which I'm using. You see up here that I'm logged in, yeah, and that's what I was referring to, that the settings are transportable. Let's just discuss the initial screen elements here. What's called here, these three stripes up to the left, we call it the hamburger menu because it looks like a hamburger. It's the path to settings, trajectory, to plugins and the like. The second one is a search box for location. So you can enter a name like, for instance, Todi, and it actually finds the location. Well, it turns out there's a webcam there, which is why it switched to the webcam view. Let me clear that. Oh, I still have the track day plugin running. Let me delete this because that is one step ahead. So here's Todi. So you can search for location by name here, and with the heart symbol you can set a favorite location. You can zoom in and zoom out of the web view. There's nothing really new here. At the bottom here, we find what's called a timeline, the time chooser. That one is very important for working with models and looking into the future. So we have the location and time. Let me find Todi again. Well, it's about here. Fine. What do you see if I click a location? You get something like a marker with a wind value and a wind direction, and a little drop down here, the orange drop down here. That's, if you will, is a simplified standard forecast. And to do so, it uses the model which you have chosen in the top right box here. Yeah, you see here that for this location, there are several models available: the ECMWF, the ICON family, Global, ICON EU, and our own. Yeah. So, and if you switch the model, you see that the forecast changes. Yeah. Now this little location marker only tells wind direction and speed. If we click the drop down here, what you get is basically something like a simplified standard forecast for using that model. The current views actually are wrong. Well, so let's go back to something more standard. By the way, if you fork over something like 20 euros a year, you become what's called a premium user. And what you get is a higher time resolution of the forecasts. That is the view which you get for the free version. And if you pay them a moderate sum, that's what you get. So again, let's have a look at Saturday. Let's assume we might fly Saturday in Todi. We are looking at the icon.eu model. So that doesn't look that bad. But in this view, we have only one single model. What we can do is we can actually compare several models. We click that, and now we see the forecasts for several models in tabular form laid on top of each other. That's already something quite valuable. So if we go, say, to the 6 to 7 o'clock morning view, the comparison of the view of the models gives you also an indirect hint, namely, how well do they agree? If they all say the weather's going to be peachy, like here, almost no clouds, only ECMWF has a little bit cloud in there. The others look great pretty much. Also pretty low ground winds, something like 3 kilometers an hour, 0, 1. Only Arome says 5. Arome, is my experience, also tends to estimate ground winds a little bit on the higher end of the range. But also the wind directions mostly agree, mostly northerly winds. So that already gives that's probably a good flying day. Now, that just gives us the average wind. If you want to fly, you probably want to know about gusts, okay? You can do that in two ways, but if you're already into comparing a particular location, you want to take a different view, namely the wind view. You see that on the left bottom here, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the wind comparison. Yeah. I understand this is now a little bit small. Let me try if I can make it bigger. No, I can't. The wind comparison gives you a similar view like the one we had, namely all the models which are applicable for that location. And it also gives you the gusts. Yeah. So if we look at Saturday 6 here, the gusts here would be 4, 3, 7, 5, 8, according to these models. So good enough to fly. Yeah. So that is a very valuable comparison view, especially if they all agree. Yeah. My experience is that in situations where there's very low winds, yeah, models create and obviously make up of widely varying wind directions. It is quite possible that you have different. We're still in that view. So okay, sorry. You can see windrows with opposing directions from two models, no problem. But that's quite typical for average winds, for low wind situations. So we covered the following: we're setting a marker, we're looking at the, if you will, the basic forecast. They call it the basic forecast for a location. That's according to your chosen model. Okay. Let's compare all those models. So that's the basic forecast view, but for all the models applicable to that location. And looking at the wind only for a location, we click at the wind drill down here, if you will. There's some other views here which I recommend exploring. Waves is not applicable to us, but the airgram is. That gives you a vertical aspect to the atmosphere. For instance, likely cloud and rain indication. Again, if we look forward to Saturday morning, because we took that as an example, there's absolutely no precipitation and clouds inside for that day. So again, that looks pretty well. There's a third view called here airgram, which gives you the wind bobs in the vertical direction. So that might be also interesting to study here. For instance, for Saturday, we be around here. So that would say near the ground, it's northeasterly. Northeast to northeast, and more turning to a north as you go up. Yeah? So that's the vertical picture. Note that there's a different way of doing a look up with a model. It's called the sounding. Sorry about that. I screwed up here. You need to right click after you set a location marker, and this gives you all the options of that location picker. One in particular is called sounding, yeah, and that gives you something like a sounding forecast. Yeah? How's the vertical view of the atmosphere going to look? The sounding forecast by default goes up to like 14,000 meters or so, which is a lot. You can zoom into the lower layers by the mouse wheel. For instance, now we have zoomed into like 4,000 meters. We can still drill in more. Now we have a top of about 3,500, 3,300 meters. That's more sensible for us. And now you see the forecast for the section of the atmosphere, which is relevant to us. Nothing surprising here. Temperature and dew points and the wind puffs. That's pretty much like the radio sounds report. And there's a good reason why this view is integrated with the radio sound. For instance, here below this sounding forecast, you see the closest radio sound forecasts. One would be from Rome, and the one Regina Divine, I don't know. Anyway, they're about 80 and 120 kilometers away. Let's choose the next one. So we'll cover radio sounds right away. And what this gives you is, it shows the flight path of the radio sound. It's the weather balloon they started with a little transponder, transmitter on it. And was started around here. Let's see where we were. We were in Todi. So that's about 80 kilometers. Yeah? And it's important to see when that data, from when that data was. You see the timestamp. So that's from August 7. That's an old forecast. That's an old measurement. The last one is already 3 days old. That's pretty useless. Yeah. So think twice. So let's look at a different one. Let's go back to Todi and choose one which is closer. And we have the Rome ascent would be closer. And that also matches more closely with the wind directions, which we got for Todi. Now this is a sound, that's an actual measurement, other than the forecast, which is based on the weather models. It's just shown in the same method, this vertical forecast view. And also in the radio sound view, you can drill down to the lower levels, just as I did in the sounding forecast. So let's do this. Now we're about 3,000, 2,800. Sounds about right. And this gives us the current measurements, for current being today noon, yeah, 11 Zulu, of the atmosphere in Rome. That's 120 kilometers away. This might not be particularly relevant for the ground wind situation, but very much so for the free atmosphere, because above the skylines, the local variation is not that much. So that's an observation. You will find as these radio sound forecasts are always synchronized. They're typically at like midnight or noon. And the reason for that being the radio sound forecasts provide the initial values for the forecast models. It's a very important data source. So that's why they try to have these data at the same time. Good. So we covered where we're drifting a little bit towards the detail here. Let me head back to the presentation. Yeah, we covered drilling down to one particular layer, in that case wind. Let's return to setting up the thing. So we discussed the major screen elements. We touched on the models down to the right. Above the models, you'll find something. Oh, damn it! I forgot the name. What the name was? It chooser. Some kind of chooser. Anyway, this is an important one, and I suggest you study it. You can choose what's being displayed here. For instance, I have the airports, I've reported temperatures, reported wind, the favorite locations, which are indicated by heart symbol. The webcams, not applicable for me, is paragliding spots, but it might be for other people. Kiting, surfing, tide forecasts, that's for the sailing crowd, and the radio sounds. So if you want to get at radio sounds this way, you see the little balloon symbol here. And if we click that symbol, you'll see that round symbols appear, and that gets us back to the radio sound view, where we already were. So that's a quick drill down on a particular aspect. Very helpful is as I mentioned, is the webcam view. Okay, let's dig in here. For instance, where are we roughly? Anyway, let's take anyone. Click on that webcam. So you get a current view. You can go back in time. And you can go full screen for that. So that's quite helpful. We can play through the last 24 hours. Okay. My internet connection doesn't like that. So, but the last, that is the current view from that particular webcam. So that's a very useful integration of external data sources. Let me click that away and go back to the other features. We talked about airports. Yeah. You see that little rings appeared here, and if I hover over it, that's a small airport near Rome. This is Rome Fiumicino. That's a major one. So let's click on it. You see that it's green, meaning VFR conditions. I click on it, and on the left you get a side dock with basic information. So if you're in dire need of the runway information, not sure that is relevant for us. You get the current metas, the applicable webcams in the vicinity, and also the NOTAMs, which are applicable for that region. So that's from a drill down from the airport view, from the airport's view. The others, for instance, this one, you see this one isn't green, but something like pinkish. And this is, I don't know what the name of it is. Let's click on it. It's in limited IFR for some reason. So the rough meteorological condition is indicated by the color of the airport ring. The other two, which I chose, are the reported wind values. These are the stations, if you will. These give you the current winds. If you click on one, you get a drill down view on that particular station. The overview view just gives you the latest reading, and that gives you the reading over the last week or so for this model. And I think you can actually compare that particular station to a forecast. Let's see. Okay, I utterly failed at it. Sorry, pressed one button too much. Again, so hover over it, you get the current wind direction speed. Click it, you get the drill down view. And we'll leave that once more. So that was the station, and I think that was the temperature reading. Again, you can set that up by clicking on more layers and ticking the options which you want. For instance, if I were to, I have no idea why that doesn't work. I could, there's even a radioactive activity layer, which I'm not interested in. So that's that particular layer. We covered the models view. The last element down here to the bottom, that's the units and the color grading of what is being shown. Now you notice that if I had switched to a knots units display, for instance, that particular station is at 3 knots gusting to 6. If you click on this unit bar down here, you can change the units. For instance, now it's BO4, which I don't use, meter per second, or miles per hour, or kilometers per hour, which I'm most familiar with. So that's how you change the units. Okay. The last thing which we covered on this slide was which layers do we choose to have in this menu here on the right. By the way, the default layer is always the wind layer, and you choose the layer by clicking on the symbol or on the name of it. For instance, there's no radar echoes currently in Italy, which means it's grandiose weather. But if we zoom in the east of Slovenia, we have some radar echoes there. I'll click that off so I don't have the station views intermixed here. So that's the radar echo. Very useful to have as a movie developing over a time window. That is a 1 hour view of the radar for that region. You can go back there to 6 or 12 hours, and you can choose the speeds by which that animation moves. But it gives you a rough idea on how fast that moves and which direction it moves. So that's one layer which I keep around, at least during summer. In winter, it's less helpful, except for precipitation. Another one, very important one, is the satellite film. And they've done a great job in geographically presenting that, visually presenting that. Let's do a 12-hour satellite film for pretty much all of Europe and near Asia. Let's see what's happening there. Initially, it takes a while to load because it's quite a lot of data. But once it's loaded, it moves more smoothly. Still loading because of a slow internet connection. But we'll get there. It has different choices on visualization, which I don't understand. But roughly with this view, it's the infrared view, I think. It colors areas of high humidity with a blue color. So that the satellite film now is loaded and is moving. That's a 12-hour view. So that was the front which passed today, I think. It wasn't very intense. So that's the satellite view. Let's stop that. As I mentioned, the wind view was the default view. Okay, the colors, this heat map representation gives you an idea already what the wind is likely to be. You remember the unit view here at the bottom. So you see the outflow from the Rhone Valley here near Marseille, and that's quite quick. If we look there, that looks like Mistral to me. And also in the Eastern Adriatic, there's some Bora developing. So that's the wind layer. Wind gusts, that's more. That's a very relevant takeoff check. Again, if we were looking for Todi, we looked at the numeric values already. This view, the wind gusts view, gives you, if you will, a colorized view. And notice, let me see, with too far north, Todi, here we are. Notice that the granularity of the wind map changes with the resolution of the model. Yeah, so we have an ECMW is 9 kilometers. Now switch to Arome. You see a much higher granularity in a much higher level of detail. And by the way, here you see the border of the coverage of the Arome model. I mentioned initially it covers mostly Western Europe and some of the Mediterranean, some of the British Isles. So it's a rather local model, but a really detailed one. And if we At the other extreme, we switch to GWFS. Now look at the changing granularity. Whoosh, all the detail is gone, okay? I can use some detail, arome, highest detail. So that's what grid resolution gives you. So this set of layers down here is basically my standard set of layers, which I use during summer. I have the weather radar, satellite film, wind gusts, of course, rain and precipitation. Well, there isn't much going on in Europe at the moment. There's a little bit on the British Isles, as to be expected on the island. New snow isn't really relevant this time of the year. If I'd say, okay, I'll keep the space, I can click that away and I won't see that layer anymore in my summer view, if you will. Thunderstorms is more relevant. Again, great weather, most of Europe, but you'll see, well, never mind, Ukraine has a lot of problems already. There's thunderstorms there. If you want to drill down on temperature and dew point, I keep these layers around. That's related to humidity, really. But I rarely use this. An important one is cloudiness. Yeah, again, subject to the resolution of your friendly weather model. Okay, GFS. See how much coarser than icon the cloudiness is. So there are a couple of cloud layers here. There's clouds, high, medium, and low clouds. Low is everything below 2,000 meters. Medium is 2,000 to 7,000, and high clouds is above that. And just clouds is an aggregate figure, if you will. You can, as a rule of thumb, if it's less than 90%, you can land through it. So this gives you an indication of the cloudiness at that point in time. So we were looking forward to Saturday, something like 6, for an example, and you'll see nothing. There's no clouds whatsoever. Great flying weather. Yeah. Same thing goes for the fog layer. Okay. You'll probably find that in the morning. You'll find some regions, especially in the valleys, which have some fog forecast. Big fat warning, fog forecasts are one of the more difficult problems I understand in meteorology. Again, I'm an MBA, but fog forecasts are usually, can be, let's say, variable in quality, if you know what I mean. That's where, when you're not sure if where you want to land has fog or not, consider using a webcam, consider using the stations or a nearby radio sound, because the radio sound lower layers give you a spread indication, and from that you can deduce whether it's currently fog or not. For instance, one rather important radio sound for Alps crossing is the Udine radio sound ascent, yeah, because that's the most relevant location for the landing region if we come across the main ridge, yeah. And the radio sound will give us a true picture of the lower levels. The forecast is just that, the forecast, yeah. So look twice. Look at try to get a look at stations in the region. You find some stations. You might have to drill down. For instance, let's drill down on this one. And if you're lucky, you'll have humidity in that station. For instance, that station has humidity. Yeah? If you're below 90, you're good. Yeah? That's not a qualified advice. Yeah? And this was not a briefing, but this is what you get. Okay. So with fog forecast, we a little bit cautious. Cloud tops, cloud base. Well, there's really nothing to report on here. Let's look. Oh, there's actually some clouds sitting on top of mountains here. Visibility can be helpful. Yeah. Actually, there's reduced visibility there, or some clouds here. Cape index, that's one more if you evolve for advanced users. A cape is an aggregate index which gives you an indication of the tendency for high convective activity, read as thunderstorms. Yeah? And we'll see that basically the tendency to thunderstorms is only some places in the Mediterranean. For that value, thumb value, more than 1,000 joules per kilogram, be cautious, okay? Below that, we might give it a try. The last layer, which we introduced a couple of months ago, which I found very helpful for planning a takeoff, is the terminals layer. That gives you a rough indication when the terminals start. And you might want to use that in combination with the time picker, yeah, or the timeline. Let's go back to our eternal example in Todi. So let's see when the terminals would begin in near Todi on Saturday. Well, actually, what we can do is we can play the timeline, and we get now a moving film. Let's see, at 8, it started, and now we have full thermal activity. Let's go back in time. I do that with a cursor left key. Yeah, 9 might still be doable. Yeah. 8 is okay. 10 o'clock here in the pits with respect to thermal activity. Okay, this one is highly recommended. So that's my choice of layers. Okay, we're 1 hour 7 into the talk. But that's the foundation, and we'll now move on to the fun part. Let me get back to the presentation. We covered this. Yeah, we covered the layers. We discussed the screen layout. We did the live examples. Okay, now we get to the fun part. We're using plugins. I discussed this already, so which I'm turning away from the slide material and returning to the browser because that's more useful to you. So, okay, let's get back to a standard view. Wind. I think you should be seeing the browser. Yes, you do. Okay, so again, not on mobiles, not on tablets. Now we do trajectories for Todi for Saturday morning because that's a hypothetical example. We click on the step 1, click on the hamburger menu. Step 2, look down here. You see the line install Windy plugin. Okay, you want that? We click on that. Now what comes up is a list of choices. For instance, there's an airspaces plugin, day and night, the change, density, altitudes, flight plan, paragliding, yada, 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 yada. And second to last, you'll find the trajectory plugin. What you want is click on open here. Yeah. And the plugin loads and it shows you plugin specific options which you can set. That is a lot, but the 3 important ones are the levels which you're looking at. So during summertime, I choose everything below 2,000 or 3,000 meters because if you go higher than that, it's going to be hazy anyway. In winter, I go up there to let's say flight level 180, like 5,000 feet and 500 meters. Yeah. Again, you can choose the models which are applicable there in the region where we're looking at. the highest resolution which we can get is the IconEU model with 7, I think, and ECMWF would be an option if we looked further ahead. For this example, we'll only use one model. You can choose the duration. Yeah, we're going for a typical 2-hour flight. We can ignore the 2 ascent and descent choices. You can simulate an ascent and simulate a descent, but for just a quick look at the forecast, how will be other conditions tomorrow, we don't simulate the ascent and descent. We set the duration to 2 hours, but you can turn the maximum duration up to 240 hours. Now that's not for us, but for the gas balloon community, really, and for the long duration they're flying in. So we choose the 2-hour thing, and this is it for a start. So select layers, select model, select duration. That covers that. We need, as always, a location. So we set the location picker and we set the time. We set the time chooser to Saturday 6 o'clock. And now we click start here. And you see there's something going on here. A couple of lines were drawn here. And these are the trajectories for the levels which we chose here, according to this model for this time. And that confirms our suspicion it's mostly northeasterly winds here. You can, unfortunately, it goes into detail quite quickly, but you can click on these trajectories and it gives you some detail. For instance, this one is the 1500 meters trajectory, and it's about 22 kilometers an hour, 21 kilometers an hour there, and direction 51 degrees, so roughly northeasterly. Yeah, you can drill down on this. With this example, we just did a single model. What I will do now is click the ECMWF model and do the whole thing again. The reason is what you'll see in a minute. It has a very useful feature because which you get only with ECMWF, namely a cross section along the forecasted path. You get a cross section of the atmosphere. So let's clear that and do again. Start again. The time is set. The location is set. Levels are set. Models are set. So let's click start. Okay. It takes a little bit longer. Of course, it gives us a lot more different lines because we have now two models. By the way, not every model covers every altitude here. Yeah, they have different granularity. So let's try to find a ECMWF trajectory here, like maybe. I think they're distinguished by the shape of the points, if I remember correctly. Yes, the ones with the round points are the ECMWF trajectories. I clicked on one, it shows active. This is the 750 meter trajectory, about 20 kilometers an hour, also northeasterly. But if you look closely, you'll see something down to the right here. It's called route planner. I suggest you try this. This is super valuable. Yeah, we click on it. It takes a bit to open. And what you get here is a cross section along this flight path. Yeah. So going from left to right, you see the views are synchronized. Yeah. And that flight path shows you the atmosphere along the, this cross section shows you the conditions in the atmosphere along this flight path. It also shows you the ground level. For instance, it shows you that we might hit a mountain if we stay that low. So that's helpful information, but hopefully our visas is still okay. This one goes now up to flight level 100, if I see this correctly. You can choose here a lower ceiling, and then you get more detail in the cross section. Let's do this. I've chosen top level, flight level 50. The purple line is the trajectory, and you see if we don't rise here, we might hit the mountain here. Yeah. You see the wind paths, and you would also see, for instance, rain, clouds, fog, and the like. But it's great Italian summer weather, so there's nothing here. If we do that elsewhere, no, I think we'll lose too much time. You just imagine that and try it at home for a location which has bad weather, and you'll find that gives a pretty accurate picture of the atmosphere. So repeat, your local favorite model and ECMWF, find an ECMWF trajectory and do a cross section. That gives you a nice view on what is ahead. So that is the basic usage of the trajectory plugin. I click that away, and I click that away. Let me see. Yeah, if I click right, I get back this menu. The ones which were in Todi, remember, I posted a link to a map with these lines being drawn on the map. The way I do this is I download the GPX file. Yeah. Just move this. Then I go to a website called GPS Visualizer. Yeah, you see it. Okay, good. That can transform a GPX track into a map. So let me load this directory. It chooses a GPX file. I can do a demo title, and I can draw tracks as waypoints, and that's all I need. I draw the map, and this is what you got, this forecast, which I posted on the group. So this is a smaller view. You can download the HTML, which is generated for this page. Sometimes I do that, and I upload that to my server so to keep it around longer term. If it's just for a day or three, you can use the copy which is online at GPS Visualizer. That's periodically erased after a couple of days. But if you were just looking at tomorrow, that's pretty much it. It's good enough for that. So that's the delivery view, but it's just the data from Windy, which I exported through the GPX function here. Yeah. That's how I distribute that. We're at 19:18. We have 12 minutes to go. We did the trajectory plugin. Okay, I get this right now. Yeah. We have to covered on create that. We have to skip the trajectories within terrain and in the free atmosphere. We're running out of time. One trick I'll do cover though is the radar layer can be quite useful in forecasting. Will a thunderstorm cell hit me or not? Yeah, and the trick here is twofold. First, thunderstorms typically move at an altitude of 3,000 to 4,000, 4,500 meters. So what you can do is you combine the radar view with the trajectory plugin. You choose a cell. This one might touch me. When will it be here? And then you do a trajectory forecast for that. Instead of going through this lame material here, let's just try this out live, because we still have the trajectory plugin loaded. Let me erase that here. Clear. Yeah. I switch to the radar view, weather radar. Now we gotta find a location where there's where there's some convective activity. Okay, Murska Sobota in eastern Slovenia is it. Let's again do let's do a 6-hour radar film for that location. Yeah. That's a little bit long, but okay, let me stop here. That is you see, this cell is already in decay. Yeah, it was more active 15 minutes ago. Yeah, it's not a great time of the day to do it. Nevertheless, let's try it. Let's go back an hour and zoom out a little bit. Yeah, and let's say, okay, this cell, will it hit me or not? So what I do is I set the location here. I switch to the wind view, which gives me the timeline. The radar view doesn't have an explicit timeline. I need that. And I set the time to now. Yeah. And now I do let's say, a 6 hours. Let's do a 6-hour forecast. And we select only the layers which are relevant for thunderstorms, which is 3,000 and 4,200. This is a rough guesstimate. I'm just using Icon EU, or actually, here we have Icon D2 coverage, so let's choose Icon D2. So that's the parameters for that. I've set the timeline to now. Now that's Thursday, 0 o'clock now. It's more like Thursday, 9, so about like so. Okay. So that gives us the wind forecast for roughly now. And now we do a 2 trajectories, 2 altitudes for 6 hours. Okay. You see these are the likely paths of these cells. Now we can switch back to the radar view. Yeah. And that gives us an estimate on how this cell is likely to move. Yeah. You see that the trajectory forecast has hourly intervals. So in about an hour, it should be about here, 2 hours about here, and the like. Not a scientific method, but it can give you an idea. There's one big caveat with the method. You don't, the radar view, as it is a view of the past. So it does not tell you about newly formed cells, and it doesn't show you decaying cells. Yeah. So that method, of course, is just a rough guesstimate. It's nothing professionally particularly valid. Just a trick in a bag. Anyway, we're at 1924, so we're running kind of low. We covered the radar layer. I have to skip the long-term forecast. That's too much for today. I'm happy to do that. In particular, if people have looked at the related material, the Alps crossing, because that's very relevant here. If you have problems with Windy, my suggestion is you sign up at the Windy Community Forum. Most of the standard questions are being asked and answered there. There's a large body of already answered questions. And if I have a problem, also go there. That's quite helpful. Once in a while, you'll find something on this theme on the Windy on my blog. Now, who's done all this on the software side? That's us three. The radio sound and trajectory plugin were done by Chris, who's I think tuned in today. Heidi, my cherished mentor, which told me a lot about meteorology and safe flying. Greatest meteorology in Europe for flying and ballooning and parachuting. Very senior advice. Yeah, and myself. So we did this part of the functionality with it. And I hope that what I talked about will make your next trip safer and you can give more attention to the surroundings. So if you have any remaining questions or topics which you want to discuss now, go ahead and do so now. We'll wait a little bit what comes up. Other than that, we can conclude.